Hi, welcome back to the MathSocial Math channel. Today we're going to practice finding the slope of a line given two random points. Let's get started. Before we begin, let's talk about how you find the slope of a line. The first thing you do is you count the units that you go up or that you go down. A lot of people call this the rise. The second thing that you do is you count how many units you go right. Lots of people call this the run. So essentially, you're finding the rise over the run, and that gives you the slope. So our first set of points are 1, 2, and 5, 6. And we're trying to figure out what would the slope be if we were to connect those points. But I don't want to always have you connect the points. That's so much work. I want you to be able to kind of figure this out without graphing it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the rise. And whenever you go up or down, that refers to which axis, the y-axis or the x-axis. If you said y-axis, that is right. Whenever you go up or down, that's referring to the y. So when I look at these points, the first points that I'm going to look at are this 2 and this 6. And I'm going to think, what would I add to 2 to get to 6? And that is going to be my rise. And the number that you would add to 2 to get to 6 would be 4. Okay? The next part of finding the slope is the run. And that we always want to count how many units you go right, okay? How many units you're adding to the x. So for this, I'm going to think, what would I add to 1 to get to 5? And we would add 4. So the rise over the run would be 4 over 4, which reduces to 1 over 1, which is just 1. So if we were to connect these points, the slope of that line would be 1. We would start down here at 1, 2, and we'd go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and we'd have a line that went like this. Okay, let's do another one. Here's our next example, and I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to compare my y points, and then I'm going to compare my x points. And the reason I'm doing it in that order is because when you're talking about slope, it's always the rise over the run. And the rise is talking about the y, and the run is talking about the x. Okay, so you can really start with either point. I always just look at the points, and I always want to start off with the easier one. So if I go like this and I think, what do you add to 2 to get to 7? I'm also going to need to do, what do you add to -5 to get to 4? If we go this direction and add, that is the way we have to do it for both points. We couldn't do like, what do I add to 2 to get to 7? And then what do I add to 4 to get to -5? Whatever set of points you start with, you have to start with that point the next time too. So what number would I add to 2 to get to 7? Well, that would be 5. What am I going to add to -5 to get to 4? So if you have trouble with negatives, think if you were $5 in debt, how much money would you need to make to get back up to +4? Well, you would have to make up that money in debt, plus you'd have to make 4 more, which would give you a total of 9. So that is going to be our run. And the slope of this line, if we were to connect these points, would be 5 over 9 or 5/9. And we would go up 5 over 9, put a point. Up 5 over 9, put a point. And that would be our line. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, our next set of points are 1, 3, and 3, -3. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my y points right here, and I'm going to think, what would I have to add to 3 to get to -3? So right away, I want you to see that -3 is a smaller number. So if I start off with 3 and I have to get a smaller number, I am going to be adding a negative number to this, okay? So the negative number that I would add, I would have to get rid of this 3 and I would have to go down 3 more. So I am going to add a negative 6, okay? And then what number am I going to add to 1 to get to 3? Well, that is going to be 2. Okay, the next thing we have to do is just reduce this and write it a little more properly. So whenever you have a negative sign, you don't really want it to be attached to one of these two numbers. You kind of just want to write it out in front of the fraction. And then the last thing we're going to do is reduce 6 over 2 or divide 6 divided by 2 to get 3. So our slope is going to be negative 3. So if we drew a line and connected those points, we would go down 3 over 1, down 3 over 1, and they would have a negative slope. Let's do another one. Here we have the points 7, 3 and 10, 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is think, what would I add to 3 to get to 3? And that would be 0. And then what would I add to 7 to get to 10? And that would be 3. And 0 in the numerator means just 0. 0 thirds reduces to the number 0. And if you think about this, if I graphed the point 7, 3, which would be about right here, and 10, 3, which would be about right here, and I drew a line, that line would be perfectly horizontal, and a perfectly horizontal line has a slope of 0. Think of the ground that you walk on. The ground that you walk on is perfectly flat. It does not go up, it does not go down. It has a slope of 0. Okay, let's do another one. Here is my next set of points, negative 2, 4, and negative 2, 6. So the first thing I'm going to do is think, what would I add to 4 to get to negative 6? And since negative 6 is smaller than 4, I know I'd be adding a negative number. Okay, so I would have to get rid of that 4 plus go even more in debt to negative 6. So I would need to add a negative 10. Okay, and then over here, what would I add to negative 2 to get to negative 2? And that would be 0. Now, whenever you have a 0 in the denominator, that is not possible, and that would actually create a line with a slope called undefined. It would go straight vertically like this. If you think about these points, negative 2, 4 would be about there, and negative 2, negative 6 would be about right here, and our line would go perfectly up and down, which is vertical, and that is called undefined. The slope would be undefined. So if you ever get a 0 in the denominator, that is called undefined. The last one that we did, we had a 0 in the numerator. That would run this way, and that has a slope of 0. Okay. If this makes sense to you, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe below. Otherwise, stay on here. I am going to teach you the formula that you might learn in one of your math classes and show you how that works too. One sec. Here was the first problem that we did. We had the point 1, 2, and we had the point 5, 6. And I told you to look at this number 2 and think, what would you add to 2 to get to 6? And then what would you add to 1 to get to 5? And we ended up getting 4 over 4, which would reduce to 1. So sometimes you might see this formula instead of the way I did it. And I just want to show you how this works just in case you ever run into it. So remember, the first point is our x, the second point is our y, okay? Then you just pick one set of your points to be your first set, and you pick the other set of points to be your second set, okay? I'm just going to say this is my first set, so I'm going to write a little 1 right here. And I'm going to say this is my second set, so I'm going to write a little 2 right here. So basically, you would take your second point, your second y point, and in my case, that is 6. And instead of writing this, I'm going to write 6. And then you would take your first y point, which was 2, and I'm going to write that there. And then on the bottom, just like we've been doing, would be your x points. So you're going to take your second x point, which in my case it was 5, and then you're going to subtract your first x point, which in mine was 1. And then we're going to go 6 minus 2, which is 4, and 5 minus 1, which is 4, and that reduces to 1. So you get the same answer if you decide to use the formula. I just wanted you to understand why we do what you do. So I was talking about rise over run, and I was trying to get you to think about slope. But if this makes more sense to you, feel free to use this too. You're basically just finding the difference in the y points and then the difference in the x points. The only thing you need to remember is if you use this set of points for your second ones, you have to use this y and this x first. And then if you use these points for your first points, you have to use those there, okay? I hope that helped you. Let me know. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you later. Bye.